How could you upgrade the worst built home in America? Now, if you haven't watched my last video, press pause here real quick and go watch the last video I published. I'll put a link in the description. We went and toured a house under construction by a production builder that is code legal, but is absolutely terrible, just terrible construction. And there's a few things that could be substituted product-wise and methods-wise, let's say, that would make the performance go up exponentially and really wouldn't cost that much more. So in the build show today, we're going to explore 5 wall assemblies. Traditional stick building, really not much different than what you saw on that job site, but swapping some materials and some methods to much higher performance. Today's build show all about fixing the worst built house in America. Let's get going. All right, guys, so first off, let's talk about what we saw at that job site. That was 2x4 construction with a cardboard sheathing on the outside, and then ultimately a standard fiberglass R13 batt. Now, I say that's code legal, but it's not code legal everywhere in the US, and you need to figure out which IECC, International Energy Conservation Code cycle you're under. But currently where I am, we're under the 2015 codes, and that says that in climate zones 1 or 2, you can build a standard 2x4 wall with R13 cavity insulation, and you're legal. And that's what we saw at that house. So that is legal per code in terms of insulation requirement. Now, I would venture to guess that if they had a blower door test, they would not meet their air tightness requirements, although that's not being enforced in many jurisdictions of the US yet. It's going to be. And as we publish this video, my hope is that you're interested in building not just a code legal house, but at least that or better. Okay, so a 2x4 wall, that's actually legal to build in all climate zones. You can build a house that will meet insulation requirements with just a 2x4 everywhere. But if you look at this requirement, as you get into zone 3, you either need to put R20 in your cavity, meaning now you got a frame with a 2x6 wall, or you need to go R13 plus a number. And when you see a plus, that means exterior insulation. That's either something like this, which is zip R that has insulation bonded to the sheathing, or that's rock wool comfort batt on the outside, or polyiso or XPS, or some other type of sheet insulation installed on the outside of the house. So even in the very coldest climate, Alaska is a mix between climate zones 7 and 8, you can build a 2x4 wall. You just need R10 on the outside, or you can build with 2x6s and you need an R5 on the outside. So back to our original question, how do we upgrade America's worst built home that I was in the other day? The easiest way to do that is this right here. We're going to go ahead and swap out that cardboard sheathing for OSB sheathing. This is going to be the least cost way to sheathe your house, and then put a standard mechanically attached house wrap, Tyvek basically, a white house wrap that you're going to hammer tack a staple on to hold on. This is going to be a much, much better house. It's going to give it much better rack strength. It also means that we're going to have to now force our trades to drill through and make a clean hole that we can actually air seal later. And when we put a house wrap on the outside instead of that cardboard sheathing, we can use much better products to waterproof the house, because water is the #1 enemy to durability. And if you saw that house, there was all kinds of penetrations that were done poorly, including windows. They were using a standard visqueen, a black visqueen, which is plastic basically, for a sill pan for the windows. And if you look in the corners, there's a bunch of cuts in those corners because it's not a flexible material, which means that those corners are vulnerable if water were to get in there. And anytime they penetrated with wires or pipes, it's really hard to air seal when you're using that cardboard sheathing. When we go to plywood or OSB or a solid sheathing and then put a mechanically attached house wrap, so much better. So that's #1. Now let's talk about cost. I promised in the last video that I would show you some costs. In today's environment, materials have gone up quite a bit. And so remember that depending on when you're watching this video, these costs are going to vary, but even 6 months ago, a lot of these materials were cheaper. Today, in my town, if I were to buy a sheet of that cardboard sheathing, it's around $9. OSB is about double or slightly more of that cost, around $20. And again, that's going to vary depending where you are in the US, but $20 for a sheet of OSB. House wrap, like Tyvek, if I were to buy that on, let's say, the Lowe's website, is running about 13 cents per square foot, 1 square foot of that. So I'm going to try and break down my costs as I talk about these wall assemblies per square foot of wall. And this is inclusive of the 2x4, the sheathing, and whatever type of WRB, weather resistant barrier, house wrap we're using. So this first wall assembly, the one that's the worst built house in America, I'm estimating that house costing about $1.62 per wall square foot. And upgrading to this assembly that I think is a better assembly with OSB and house wrap, we're talking about $2.18 per square foot. So that's a 35% increase just in wall costs. Remember, we're not changing the slab, we're not changing the roof, other things. That's just per square foot of wall. So it is a little bit more, but I would say that labor is not going to increase a whole lot more. But let's also look at effective versus nominal R values. When I say nominal R value, what I mean is when you look at that bag of, let's say, Rockwool insulation, it's going to say R whatever on there, R15, let's say, for a 2x4 high density Rockwool batt. When we talk about that wall, we often as builders say, oh, that's an R13 wall. But in fact, the nominal R value is different than the effective R value. The effective R value takes into account the 2x4 studs, the headers, the double top plate, the windows, all that sort of thing. Now I'm going to leave off the windows for now, just thinking about a section of wall that includes 2x4s. We think that's R13 on that first example, but in fact, the opaque assembly is really 10.526 per an online calculator that we found. It's a pretty good one, by the way. I'll put a link in the description. Now this next assembly, when we swap out that OSB, it's actually slightly better because wood does have some insulation value, and 1/2 inch OSB, according to that calculator, is like R.6. So we're talking about an 11.11 effective R value of that wall assembly. Now let's upgrade that a little bit. Let's go to an R15 insulation, and let's upgrade our sheathing from standard OSB or plywood to something like this. Now this is Huber Zip System. Full disclosure, they've been a long-time show sponsor of mine. This isn't necessarily a sponsor video, but I do have a good relationship with these guys because I really believe in this sheathing. This is a sheathing that's made from oriented strand board, a much higher grade than standard commodity-based. And you can get it in 7/16, you can get it in 1/2 inch, which is brown, or you can get it in 5/8 thick, which is also brown. Now at my house under construction, I used standard 7/16 on my walls. It was green. And then on my roof, I went up to 1/2 inch zip sheathing on my roof, and that's brown. Now the reason why I think this is an upgrade from that first assembly is because this zip system has an integrated weather barrier. This brown facing or the green facing you see here, this is going to shed the water and keep the OSB perfectly dry. They also have a fantastic system of tape and fluid applied to take care of the joints. So when the framer installs it and nails this on, then we're going to go ahead and use the tape and the liquid flash to make this a both watertight, but also, here's the big upgrade, a much more airtight assembly. Now when you look at this assembly number 3, what you're seeing is we can air seal between the sheathing and the concrete. That's Zip liquid flash. You could also use other fluid applied products as well there. Polywall makes blueberry, which would work really well. Prosigo makes fast flash and joint and seam, which would work really well. Now I can air seal where the house meets the foundation. And remember, anytime we air seal, we're also going to do a great job of bug sealing and keeping those bugs out of our house. So this is a big upgrade. It's not a quantum leap forward in terms of insulation value, but it's a huge jump forward in terms of air tightness. And remember, air is secondary only to waterproofing when it comes to those control layers on our house. Let me take a quick break here real quick and use an example. Yeti coolers, why are these so effective? There's really 2 reasons. Number one, there's no thermal bridging. You don't see these insulated from wood studs and then they've put insulation in between. These have continuous insulation. This lid right here is one, oh, it latches well too, is one big piece of insulation in here. And it's about, I don't know, 1.5 inches thick, let's say. And secondarily, the second reason why these work so well is because you have a really good air seal. See this rubber gasket that runs all the way around the lid? When I close this lid, that rubber gasket seals up nice and tight, and they've got these rubber straps too, so that when you close that lid, it's really airtight in there. We've got good insulation and we've got good air sealing. And that's the genesis for these next couple of assemblies I'm going to talk about. Okay, so let's finish off with number 3 though. This assembly is 2x4 construction with zip sheathing and R15 batts. Again, this is going to work in climate zones 1 and 2, but you're going to have to increase to a 2x6 cavity if you're in climate zone 3, 4, 5. And this assembly would work in all those. Now we're going to bump up another 20-ish%. This is $2.63 per square foot of the assembly, and that's a 21% increase over standard OSB and house wrap with fiberglass batt insulation. So we've gotten to a higher density rock wool, we've gone to a better zip system. I'm not counting all the accessories though, so take this with a grain of salt when I'm giving you these numbers. I'm not talking about the liquid flash, I'm not talking about tapes and sealants and all that kind of stuff. I'm really just talking about strict material costs. I'm trying to give as much of a closer apples to apples as I can on these assemblies. All right, in assembly number 4, what I like about this assembly is now we can build a 2x4 wall that will work in any climate in America, including Alaska, and my assumption is Canada. I actually don't know the Canadian building code super well, but if Alaska works, my assumption is it's going to work in Canada as well. And that's by using a product like this. This is Zip R. This is insulation bonded to zip sheathing. So this is R3, Zip R3. R3 insulation bonded to zip. The way you install this is you're going to nail through the insulation. The zip is still going to be on the outside. You won't even be able to tell actually when you look at the house that there's anything different. And what I like about this is it's really straightforward and standard for the framer. For instance, my friend Matt Carricker, when he's renovating his abandoned mansion, he did the Zip R3. His builder, who had never done any exterior insulation before, was able to do it really easily with a framing crew that had no idea about these insulation details. It nails on really simply. And now we've got all the same waterproofing details, plus we've got exterior insulation. Now, if you're going to use 2x4 walls and you're in climate zones 3, 4, and 5, we need R5 on the outside of our building. So we're actually going to want to go to this. This is R6, so now we're going to be able to meet the code. We could do 2x4 construction with this Zip R6, which is 1.5 inches total in thickness, and now we're going to meet that code. Now, if we're up in Alaska or Canada, you're going to want to go to one of these two to meet your codes. In those areas, you're going to need R10 on the outside with a 2x4 wall, or with a 2x6 wall, at least R5. Now, this is R9 and R12. We're talking about a total thickness here of 2 inches and a total thickness here of 2.5 inches. And again, I like this because the details are really straightforward. We can still air seal and we can install our windows pretty standard, pretty straightforward with this. We're not changing anything from the way we've framed houses in America for the last 75 years. Okay, one thing I want to note in this detail though, as we get to the foam on the outside of the Zip R sheathing, we want to protect that bottom of the foam, and here's a great way to do it. I got this detail from my buddy Steve Basic, and I did this on my house, where we're going to rip a pressure treated 2x to the thickness of the Zip R. So if it's 1 inch, 1.5 inches, 2 inch, or 2.5 inches, we're going to rip that pressure treated to that thickness. And now we can use liquid flash by Zip to basically air seal and bug seal that base of the house. Anytime I remodel, all the rot I found on older houses is all in this bottom 1 to 2 foot area. So if we can really do bomber waterproofing in that bottom 1 to 2 feet, we know for the most part that our houses are going to be in good shape for decades to come. Okay, before we move on to the last assembly for today anyways, let's talk about pricing for this wall assembly. So if we did a 2x4 wall with zip R3 and a Rockwool R15 batt and a 2x4 wall, now we're talking about $2.95 per square foot in today's prices of that assembly. But check this out, we really jump up in performance. Our effective R value now is R14.7. I really like that. That means we've got over a 50% bump just in insulation performance from where we started at that first assembly or two. That's really, really good. And this is only a 12% jump compared to just standard zip and standard insulation. So for only 12% more for that wall square foot, we can go up to this. I really like that. Let's talk quickly about where zip R is in price today. And this is per 4x8 sheet. And again, this is my local price, just to kind of give you some local flavors. Per square foot for the zip R3, $1.38, $1.53 for the R6 zip, zip R9, $1.72, and zip R12, $1.88 per square foot material only. So really cost effective and relatively straightforward way to add that exterior continuous insulation to get that Yeti cooler effect, so to speak, and get rid of all those thermal bridges from your studs. Okay, last assembly for today. Let's talk about bumping up to 2x6 construction now. And this is actually an assembly I've done a lot here in the South over the years. 2x6 construction with plywood in the outside. And now we're going to talk about some other weather barrier options. In the South, in climate zones 1, 2, and 3, Polywall is Alumiflash Plus with a silver facer, bomber waterproofing the outside. I really, really like it. Now it does cost a little bit more, and we're going to put a high density batt in there. We're going to use a Rockwool R23 in that cavity. Now we're talking about $4.17 per square foot. So that's about a 40% jump from that last assembly. You need to decide if that's the right move for you and what your goals are, how much exposure does the house have. And all my houses that have really high exposure, meaning no overhangs, really modern construction, this is my go-to. I use this all the time. This is a really good assembly. All right, guys, we went through a lot of data today. There's a lot to talk about here, but stay tuned for my next episode. I have 5 more assemblies that I've been working on, which take the performance even higher. We're going to talk about 2x6s, 2x8s. We're going to talk cost. We're going to talk about some other exterior insulation choices, including Rockwool's Comfort Board and some other ones. Stay tuned for this next episode. And again, we're going to get into costs on these as well. But hopefully you learned something today. And if you're talking to those production builders out there or those builders that are using those more standard assemblies, talk to them about these upgrades. I really think these are going to make a big difference in not just performance, not just R value or insulation, but I think these are going to make a big difference in the longevity and the durability of our buildings in America. Because ultimately, does it really matter how insulated the house was if it falls apart and has water damage and mold and rot? No. We need to remember that water is our enemy. We've got to get our water and all of our details that come with waterproofing correct. And remember, when air leaks in too, it's usually bringing humidity in, as long as we're talking about the South. And when that humidity hits a cold condensing surface, there can be water problems with air leakage as well. So remember that Yeti cooler example. We want continuous insulation, we want good air sealing, and that's going to lead to better performance, better comfort, better built houses. Also, big thanks to my friend Lou Varney, who did all these renderings for me. Lou knocked it out of the park and really allowed me to show you visually what I was looking for on these different assemblies. He's working on the next 5 for me for the next video, so stay tuned for that. And go follow him on his Instagram feed. Guys, if you're not currently a subscriber, hit that subscribe button below. We've got new content every Tuesday and every Friday. And by the way, if you want more on high performance construction, I'd love to have you go check out our website, buildshownetwork.com. I've got several other builders and an architect, I mentioned him earlier, Steve Basic, shooting videos on how to build a better house. Go to that website and click on the link for our newsletter so you can get an update every Friday on what's happening. If you're not currently a subscriber, hit that subscribe button below. We've got new content every Tuesday and every Friday. Follow me on Twitter or Instagram. Otherwise, we'll see you next time on The Build Show.